Hi, welcome to the final episode in the current series of TWC's Digital Leadership Series with my special guest, Salih Sheikh. Salih, hi.
Hello, and I come to you in landscape finally for the first time in 4 weeks. It's only taken me 4 weeks to learn how to do it.
Yeah, we'll do a separate series on that. How to do optimum web chat. So today I think we're going to be talking about optimization, which we'll come on to in a second. I've been thinking about this all week. My strap line for optimization is rather than we make your data sing, it's that we're going to make your platform sing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, yeah.
But I think I wanted to make the point first, I don't know if you agree, I've been sort of mulling this over, that we're going to talk about the tools, the metrics, the plans that you need in order to optimize your site. But as much as anything, you do need the right people to use these tools and understand and monitor the metrics. Otherwise, I think I've certainly seen this myself, that people disappear down rabbit holes looking at the wrong thing, or, you know, trying to measure the wrong thing. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think those of like the listeners, viewers who are more shrewd would have noticed that we've kind of made the series flow in a particular way for a reason. So, build the business case, make sure then you have the right resources that you need, and then the right tools. So yeah, without a doubt, the reason we talked about people and culture before we talked about the tools and optimization is just to make sure that you've got the right people in place, the right expertise, the right intelligence, etc., to help you maximize and make the most out of the tools that you then put into place to help you optimize.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a combination, isn't it? Absolutely, of having the best platform that you can afford, and then the best people to sweat it, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So optimization, what does that mean for you then?
So I think the key thing here is that not to think that, look, built a business case, I've hired the right people, I've built the website, I've built the app, or whatever the digital platform is, my job is done. It's not done at all. And it links back to what we were saying, I think it was in the commercialization one, where we were saying, if you think that, that mantra of build it and they will come, if you think that's going to work today in this day and age, you're mistaken, because really the hard work starts once you've set all of this up, because the next step is, how do you drive traffic to the platforms? B, when they're on the platforms, how do you make their experience easier? And C, how do you get them to buy more or come back more often? So this is the time actually where you then have to really sweat this asset and work it really hard, and at quite a quick pace, which is, again, linking back to people and culture, why we were saying having hungry, energetic people in your digital team is really important, and curious people, because a lot of optimization is driven by data, and you have to adopt very much a work ethic of fast-paced test and learn, and accept that certain things may not work, but the whole point is that you use the data, use the analytics, which we'll talk through in a second, and give you a bit of guidance in terms of what sort of things to be looking for. But you use that to constantly reassess how your website, your app, etc., are working, and how you can, and where are the opportunities for improvement, and where can you make them better effectively.
Yeah, it certainly seems to me it's an iterative process. So again, an analogy we used previously was about sort of consumer behavior in the retail malts, and how merchandising and ranging grew off learning how consumers shopped a supermarket.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar for me with this, that there is so much learning still to be done about how consumers behave on e-commerce sites, and then tweaking your site to respond to that behavior. So there isn't an established optimum at the moment. It's an evolving piece.
Yeah, and to an extent, there never really will be an established optimum. You'll constantly, you're just looking to constantly evolve and move with, move with how the customer behaves effectively. So it's, in some ways, you argue, no different to the physical world again. Things change, customer habits, consumer habits change, and you adapt with the times. And this is exactly the same thing, whether that be in terms of what customers are looking for, And that's an overall piece, I guess, which is linked to the physical world as well. But even perhaps more granular to digital is how they look for it, how they behave when it comes to shopping online versus shopping in depot. And the huge advantage about online versus in depot is that you've got loads and loads of data that's very easily accessible. It's set up to give you data on your customers. So use it. I mean, and that's why I guess this is getting its own episode, because it's integral actually that you understand the value in that and use it to your benefit.
Yeah, I guess it's also keeping it fresh, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit like the retail malls change their stores around because people get bored and they tend to create habits and routine, and they never then look at new stuff. So same thing with a website, I guess, that by keeping it fresh, you're keeping your customer engaged.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, one point actually that's quite worth speaking about before we even move on to optimization. But well, actually, it's linked to optimization. It's a form of optimization which you kind of touched on. It's design. So funnily enough, I mean, at Best Way, just purely probably because I'm a marketeer more than anything else, but when we first started to look at the websites and the apps, before I could even change things from a technical platform perspective, the very first thing is I just gave the whole website a refresh. I just made it look more modern and more appealing and more fun to shop on. Now, I don't think that at the time it was better than some of the competitor websites. I mean, I think we were at one point, and then I think a lot of them had caught up. But simply by doing that refresh, I was like, well, look, I'm not going to sit around and twiddle my thumbs. There are other ways of making this a better experience for customers. So, if I have to wait a little bit longer to make the fixes to the customer journey, I will do. But in the meantime, I may as well update it and make it look modern and, even to a point where I thought it looked better than, I would argue at the time, it looked better than even Tesco's website. So don't underestimate what you can achieve through design as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So really what we're talking about here is optimizing your platform so that you are driving customer footfall or clicks, that they're visiting more frequently, and so that they're spending more as well.
Yeah, it's that classic kind of trilogy, isn't it? So driving, I guess, like awareness / penetration, driving average order value, and then driving frequency. So yeah, those are the three. So as I said, what you can't do is just expect the platform to do all the work for you. You've got to put the thinking into it. So step one, as we talked about before, you've got to think of ways and plan and be creative with how you're going to attract people to your platform. So we talked about this, I think, when we were talking about platform actually, which is how do you build points of differentiation? So for example, I mentioned that at Best Way, one of the things we did is we brought together that kind of shop on one device, finish on another, for example, or we looked at shopping lists and we built digital versions of personalized shopping lists that were easy to shop off and easy to reorder. So those were things that we could then go and market to customers. And similar thing, so the thinking you've got to, it could be features within the website and the app, or actually it could be certain promotions because you're trying to drive traffic from a competitor to you. So it could be a one-off promotion to try and incentivize them to start shopping with you and using your platform. But yeah, you've got to think very hard about how you're going to attract footfall. So that would be step one. And then step two is once they're there, how do you get them to switch their loyalty effectively? So how do you get them to shop more often and do more of their shop throughout the week with you? And then similarly, how do you also build your website and promote in a way that drives average order value and average basket size, etc. up? So those are, I guess, in some ways from a macro level, when you're looking at optimization, those are the three metrics you're really looking to drive.
Okay, so that's our kind of overarching ambition from optimization, but I guess we've got tools and tips and tricks that we can use to achieve it. So I guess the first one would probably be the tools that you can use in terms of measuring what's happening now so that you've got a benchmark to build from.
Yeah, so I think again, I just, looking back to the time at Best Way, the way we kind of approached it was the starting point was Google Analytics. You've got this, amazing accessible tool that is that basically maps across every website, and and to us that was a really useful starting point, just understanding the flow of traffic into the website, how long people were staying on that website on certain pages, and like what level we're converting to purchase, for example. So Google Analytics is this, like I said, brilliant tool. It's available to everyone, and it's almost like the base level of analytics you should set up for your sites. So that I guess is the one. It will track all your kind of, again, macro data and macro level data that we were just talking about, as well as to time spent on certain pages, and how long they spent on your website in total, like roughly number of customers, number of visits, things like that. So that's a useful tool from macro level. And then the next kind of one that we looked at was heat mapping. So that was kind of understanding, once they've landed on a page of your website, where are the hot zones, where are the cold zones, so where are more people kind of moving their mouse over, or what areas of that page are more looked at. So there's some fairly standard things you'll expect, which is the further down someone has to scroll, the less the less heat, so to speak, there is. So that's going to be a less visited part, but you might find golden nuggets, like it might be that one part of the website further down is glowing red, and lots and lots of people are visiting it, in which case make it easier, right? And that's clearly something in demand, so move it further up the page. That's one way of optimizing that page. So the heat mapping tool, again, really useful tool to understand how people are utilizing or how people are shopping, and on what like areas of your sites are useful to them.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a really important thing. At TWC, we're passionate about data visualization. Reports are great in and of themselves, but unless they're easy to read and easy to understand, then you can just spend hours looking through reams of numbers. And I think that applies to actually Google Analytics and the heat mapping piece. So the tools that are great are the ones that make it quick and easy for you to identify trends, in my experience.
Definitely. And I'm a marketeer, so the last thing I want to do is look at reams of data, which is kind of what, to be fair, when I first joined, that's kind of what it was like. All the reports we kind of got were just like very, very data Excel spreadsheet heavy. But the visualization bit is great, because it means that, at least I found that the better data is visualized, the less I've got to think about actually consuming that data. And the more I can see it, the more I can just immediately put all my energy into actually finding solutions and spotting trends. So it almost like helps me get past that first like time-consuming, mind-consuming element of, okay, right, I need to consume this to understand it first. And I think one of the tools that I was talking to you about that does it brilliantly actually is a tool called Content Square. So we just started to work with Content Square before I left. But Content Square is great because it, in a really user-friendly way, visualizes the customer's journey through your site. So what it will tell you is, I'll try and describe it as well, but effectively, there'll be an inner ring, basically. So imagine a ring, and that ring is the first page that anyone lands on your website. So, let's say 98% of that ring could be the home page, and 2% might be an About Us page, for example. Then what it will do is, for each of those segments, so the 98% and the 2%, it will then build an outer circle to that. And what that outer circle is will be split up into is, okay, of that 98% of people that lands on your homepage, what pages did they go and visit next? So did 20% go and visit a particular product page? Did 30% go and visit the About Us section straight afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. And then they'll do another ring on top of that, and another ring on top of that. And what you're then seeing is what percentage, it's almost like a funnel, right? You're seeing what percentage of your customer base is going from one page to which page next, or what's the most popular page that they go to after that. And you start to understand the customer journey a lot better. You might see that a certain page is kind of, like lots and lots of people seem to be going to a page that's 5 levels down, in which case, that the way to optimize your website is that page is in demand. Let's move it further up and make it more easily accessible. And the other thing we found actually was useful is that sometimes you get pages that have like regularly, for example, a product page where there's a buy now button. And we sometimes see that there was 0% people who would go on to a page after that. Instead, they'd almost always bounce back. And when we looked at it, what we realized was there was a link that was broken. They weren't able to add the product to their basket. So actually, that's another really useful way of utilizing that tool. So it's worth having a look at. But just it links, because you mentioned data visualization, I just thought it's a really good example of a tool that brings data to life in a way that's really easy to consume. And I'd say the same thing about heat mapping actually as well. Heat mapping is great. It's very visual. Just seeing kind of where different like levels of demand on a website page are. And that kind of gives you really useful data to understand how you need to move the page around, how you need to reformat the website, etc. And with the goal always of just making the user experience as seamless and easy as possible.
Yeah, I guess that leads on to actually what is it that we're measuring here. So it's the key metrics that you want to be looking at. So I guess first and foremost, it's user experience, because you want someone to have a great experience. What else do we need to be factoring in terms of our key metrics?
Yeah, so I guess like the most important ones for me when I was looking at it, especially after you've just built it, are ease of use. So any data that shows that this is easy to use, that could be that could literally be you leaving or building like a feedback box where you ask, like how easy was it to navigate the website, and just collect the data that way. You can also use certain bits of Google Analytics, certain bits of Content Square, for example, in the customer journey mapping. You'll get a sense of how easy the journey is, because really like there'll be a balance between how long people are dwelling on certain pages, and so you can kind of look at the amount of time people are spending on certain pages, but then also the conversion element. So are you converting them to clicking through to the next page, and you'll get a sense of how satisfied. And you should always, obviously I would very much advocate that you always want to look at qualitative data with quantitative data. So you've got the quantitative coming through from these analytics tools we're talking about, but then also go and speak with customers. Even better, go and sit with customers as they're doing their ordering and learn about some of their pain points. So the ease of use and the ease of user experience, very, very important.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about this, the customer satisfaction piece. How easy is it to collect the qual data? And this isn't my area of expertise at all. So, did you have feedback buttons on the site, and then did you do focus groups and stuff?
Yeah, so we did. I wouldn't go as far as saying we did focus groups, but we definitely. I've always encouraged people to go out and speak to customers, and even better to learn from customers as they're doing it. And there's no better way of understanding what some of their pain points are than actually being there with them while they're doing it. So that was one. We did build a mechanism where after you were done ordering, there would be I think there was either a pop-up or an email that would come to you asking two questions really, which is, did you find everything that you were looking for? And if not, what? And that was just useful just to feed back to the trading team if there were certain aspects of the range that were missing. But then also, were you satisfied with your experience and collecting it that way? So those are the simplest ways of doing it, I think. And really both should be done hand in hand in my view, to get a really rich kind of picture of how well you're doing.
Yeah, there's that challenge, isn't there, that we know from previous research in the channel that retailers do use websites for research. So we'll go on to have a look at stuff, but then actually may choose to place their order via another route. So I guess what you've got to do is understand what proportion are naturally just using it for research because that was their original intention, and what proportion have come on but then got frustrated and left because of a problem with the experience.
Yeah, and even, I would say even better is to look at both of those things as an opportunity. So yeah, you're right. Lots of people are going to use the website as an experience, but the way I would look at that is I'm like, great, I've got them onto the website. Now, how am I going to convert them? I don't care whether their original intention was to come for research. My objective is they've landed on my website. So how am I going to build it in a way that is actually going to convert them? And what can I offer? Is it a first time offer, shopping offer, for example? that is too good for them to turn down. And anything you can do really is it's a battle, right? Like you want to win these guys over and sway them. If you manage to catch their attention even for 10 seconds, maximize the hell out of that 10 seconds.
Yes, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So the next piece I think we're going to talk about is having a sales and marketing plan for your platform. I suspect, again, I've thought about this week, I suspect there's an awful lot of wholesalers at the moment that don't have a discrete plan for their platform. They're just re-executing what they're already doing in real life. Was that an evolution that you went through, was starting to create a bespoke plan?
Yeah, definitely. So again, really helps that I'm a marketeer, I suppose. But yeah, I'm just very conscious that wholesalers have thousands and thousands of products. So really, I'm not sure how helpful it is to market everything, if that makes sense. What you want to do is be really strategic about, especially with the website. And it's no different to Defo actually. Right? So just be really strategic about what are the things that you want to push. There can be multiple reasons for that. So do you want to drive products that are more profitable, for example? And how do you do that in a way, in a way where it's not just loads of irrelevant products as well, by the way. So you've got to be careful that you've got to have a balance between what you're looking for as a business and what your objective is, as well as what the customer is looking for. So yeah, the starting point for us was we knew where the spaces were that we could play with from a marketing perspective on the website. And yeah, just ensuring we were really clear and working also with suppliers and the trading team as well on what were the different types of things that we wanted to push. So to give an example, something like, let's say, Easter is next month. Rather than just having a generic homepage, then it was about collecting products that are relevant to Easter and putting them on a kind of carousel on the homepage, for example, or having a big Easter banner on the homepage that people could click on and go through and find all the Easter products they're looking for. And we even took that, we took that a couple of steps further than that even. I think there was one example with the Cricket World Cup, I think, where there was kind of a big homepage splash about the Cricket World Cup. When you clicked on it and went through, it wasn't just loads of products that were relevant to the Cricket World Cup. It was actually a whole load of information as well. And we did the same thing, food service, for example. So, how can pubs prepare? What sort of things can pubs do to prepare and drive people into the pubs to watch the World Cup? And then at the same time, here are the products that they're probably looking for that you can buy right here. So that is again like a really core part of optimization. Optimize what you're communicating and how you're communicating it, and lead people. It comes back to that user experience thing. Make life easier for the user. So if you know that there are some key events coming up, for example, or key products that you want to promote, maybe just release your own label range, for example. Have a think about how you're going to communicate that through the website in a way that's easy for people to find and easy for people to convert.
Yeah, I guess again, coming back to real life, if a customer shops a depot, if they're walking around a cash and carry, then you have the luxury that they will have a plan for the way that they're going to walk the depot. Use your rack ends basically to feature heavy promotional activity. I guess pulling that back to a website, there's two different things. So you haven't got a customer walking every aisle, so they're not going to see everything on your website. So you've got to find a way to recreate the rack end in a virtual way. But also there's an interesting piece that you've just touched on, which is that the customer, when they're shopping on your website, has got the luxury probably of more time. So they'll read more, which means you can give them more category advice and more upselling information than perhaps you can do in the depot.
Yeah, to an extent. I think you've got to be careful with this. So actually going kind of beyond wholesale, you firstly have to think about how information is consumed these days. So bite size is the new newspaper in a way, right? So I certainly definitely I love newspapers, but I have found myself as a result of things like Facebook, Twitter, I will often read the headline and read the first paragraph and then jump to the last paragraph, which is awful. Like every time I do it and catch myself, I feel terrible. But you just gotta be conscious of that. Whether they can spend more time dwelling on your website or not, you still want the information to be communicated to them in an easy and quick to consume way. So, you know, I mean, yeah, an example which I never quite got around to actually, which we discussed, was around the buy button, for example, on a product page. Do you have a little fact about that product up there? Like, you know, it's the #1 selling product in convenience stores across the UK. Do you put like a little bit of category advice in to just to drive that, just not incentivize, sorry, just to convince the customer that yes, this is worth purchasing, and hopefully driving conversion through that. But yeah, I think it's just really important to ensure that the information you're communicating is communicated in bite-sized information on the website. Now, the one thing actually I will say is it depends on what tool you're using. So, for example, we used to do a category advice email. Now that you can be a bit more lengthy in, right? You can give a bit more information in an email. People will normally spend time reading an email. If it's a push notification, then you've got to be short, because you know that people, you know, it only comes up on the screen like this big anyway. So, and then when it comes to the actual platform, so let's say the website, if it depends on the purpose of that page. So if the purpose of the page is to tell someone about a product and get them to buy it, don't put reams and reams of category advice about that product. That is, you know, that might end up turning them off, or they might just get fed up and leave. But you can build a section of the website that is all around category advice. So you're telling customers that the purpose of this area is for me to give you more information. So if you want it, you can come and get it there. Yeah. So yeah, again, that's a classic marketing thing. Just make sure you're using your tools effectively and for the right reasons and in the right way.
Okay, so bring this to life for me. If we had decided that we wanted to uplift a particular product or a category, so say I wanted to sell more baked beans this week for some reason, what process could I go through to make that happen?
So I guess like the key thing would be kind of starting to understand how people are interacting with the baked beans page. So first of all, I don't know what percentage of people are trying to find the baked beans page. And the way, by the way, sorry, actually the starting point is to hypothesize and come up with some tests, right? So look at the data, hypothesize, and then come up with some tests. So first of all, look at the data. So around the website, how many, you know, if you, let's say you're using that customer journey tracker with Content Square, have a look at like how are people getting to the baked beans page. If you're using heat mapping, whenever the baked beans products are mentioned, how are people like are people being drawn to it or not? Is there like a high level of heat activity around the baked beans area? Similar thing on the baked beans page. How many people are clicking on the buy button? So use Google Analytics to track conversion. How many people are getting to that page and then actually adding the product to their basket and buying it. So there's kind of like a multitude of tools in that sense. Then I guess once you start to understand the data and you've looked at the kind of customer journey to get to baked beans, then have a think about, right, what can I improve on? So if this is a really core thing that I want to be pushing, should I be pulling it like towards the homepage? Should I put something on the homepage that drives people to that easier? Do I need to, from a marketing and promotional perspective, build some sort of incentive that drives people to buy baked beans? And you know, do I need to do some sort of link deal, for example? I know that lots of people love buying bread, and are buying bread very often. And maybe this is a bit more of a retail example, but why not put baked beans and bread together as a promotion, for, you know, as an example? So there's a data analytics piece, there's an optimization piece, and then there's a sales and marketing piece. To me, those are the three ways I would look at that. Okay,
cool, excellent. And then something that I guess I've experienced in a small way myself recently with our own website has been, again, the desire to keep it fresh, to change the content regularly so that people have got a reason to come back. And one of the challenges I've faced has been this piece around if you give it to an administrator, they probably don't have the skill set to be able to do things. So it ends up going back to a developer for the developer to then make changes. So again, there is a piece with this, with your platform, isn't there, in a much bigger way, about at what point you need to make changes that require developer input, and at what point, you know, you can actually run stuff yourself with your own team so that you can change things more quickly.
Yeah, and actually, so I'll come on to that. There's a step even before that, which I just realized as well, which is think about how you're changing things. The reason, so what I mean by that is, it's no different to if you suddenly, people are used to shopping your depot in a certain way. Now, if you suddenly completely change the aisles, like often you're gonna, and I'm, you know, speak from experience, you're probably gonna piss some customers off. You're gonna make their life harder. Now that doesn't mean don't change things. But actually how you communicate change becomes really important, and you've got to make sure that you're educating them, walking them through it, and also explaining the benefits of it. So that's, I guess, one step before you even get to the platform. But then you've raised a really great point in terms of the actual platform, which is the last thing you want is every time, you know, and this links back to when we were talking about platform at the beginning, actually, the more flexible a platform you have, the better, because for two reasons, really. One, to do with speed of change. If actually you don't have a very flexible platform, if you have to go back to the developers every time and get them to redevelop something, which is something Best Way went through, to be honest, then it's really time consuming, and you can't move at the pace that you need to be moving. And on top of that, you'll then also have to pay developers to do it, which is, you know, an added cost, and an unnecessary cost in this day and age for most changes, I would say. I mean, very big technical changes, yes, you will still need developers. But now and having done the research while I was at Best Way, there are a bunch of platforms now that exist of all sorts of sizes, by the way. Like, you know, you can go for the really advanced ones, the really big ones that lots of the biggest companies in the world are using. But there's lots of kind of new players entering the market as well who aren't as expensive. And they all build their platforms in a way where a system administrator or anyone within your team effectively could very easily go into that platform in the back end, and it's built in such a user-friendly way that they would be able to make the change themselves. So if they wanted to, I don't know, move cakes out of the bread taxonomy for some reason, they would be able to do that very easily. Whereas when I started in digital, I was having to go to a developer each time I needed to make a change like that. And then linked to that actually is then your content management system as well. So again, another problem I had when I was at Best Way to begin with was that every time we wanted to change what we were marketing on the homepage, for example, it would have to be redeveloped onto the homepage, and it's just expensive. So really, every modern platform will have what's called a CMS, or a content management system. Sorry. Or else you can, find another content management system provider and tag it onto your platform. Going back to what we were talking about in the first episode again about you don't need to settle. You can go and find one that is perfect for you and then have it link in with your platform. And these systems, again, they will allow you to manage all the content that you show, all the photos, the videos, the products, etc. Everything that you show on your website, you can alter it yourself. Even down to things like product names and copy, anything you want to communicate, you can edit yourself. But yeah, the key thing is when you're choosing a platform, choose something that is really flexible, that is going to allow you to do 95% of the changes you want to make rapidly. And only really you should be having to go to developers when you've got big changes and big technical changes you need to make.
Yeah, there's an important piece on that, which is about if you are making infrastructure changes with your developers, they need to have a release path and a release plan for that. So it's a much bigger deal when you're starting to upgrade things, because that's when, if you don't have a proper process, you end up introducing bugs because things haven't been tested properly, etc. It's something we're very familiar with in our business, that you need to have proper process and protocol. So it's not only the challenge of the cost and the time it takes, but actually you're opening your site up to vulnerabilities that it will break more easily because of having constant recoding. So lots of reasons. Yeah,
that exactly. So again, I can speak from experience as well. We've been through that too. So, and like I say, the great thing about this day and age is that it's much easier than it was whatever 6 years ago when I was at Best Way. It's much easier. Sorry, when I first started at Best Way, it's much easier to have flexible platforms that actually are able to do, like I say again, 90% of the things you need them to do, and in a way that you can pretty much control a lot of it as well yourself through the back end. So you're in a much better position now than certainly 6-10 years ago. So just be really wary of what the platform is capable of doing, and you know what you're going to need to go back to developer for in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a data company, I feel compelled that the piece we should close on this topic is intelligent search, which is a subject close to my heart, data logic. The classic one that wholesalers are particularly bad that in their back office systems. The one I always use is something like Coca-Cola, which ends up being described as Coke 330ml, Coca-Cola 330ml, CCEP Coke 330ml. They try and put that onto their website, and things have improved. So I'm being a little harsh here, because over the last 5 years, I think a lot of people have discovered this one. But, you know, then the customer comes in, the poor old retailer, and innocently searches for Coke 330ml and then wonders why they can't find it. So intelligent search is so important, but so is the data that's underlying it. So what's been your experience with this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of very useful things around search. The reason why search I think is particularly important is I think there was a survey done with H&M actually, where they found something like 70 to 80% of retailers who shop on wholesale websites shop using search, which kind of makes logical sense actually. Like, you know, they're running businesses. They're not probably not going to browse in the same way a consumer browses. They're running businesses. They know what they need. They know what they need to stock up on. In fact, most of the time they won't even use a product name. They'll use the SKU code. So it makes sense why search is so important. But that's the reason I guess that we want to end on it is it's really important to therefore get it right, because it's the most important bit of, I guess, almost signposting that you can do. So a couple of things we did. We moved. I remember when we first redesigned the website, we moved search right to the top of the homepage. We're like, it's the most important place, most important tool, so we need to put it in the most important place. Wanted to make it as easy as possible to find. Then the next thing was actually, what you're describing, which is that your search for online has to be intelligent. It is not the same. This is where, you know, there are obviously lots of nuances between depot experience and online experience. If I go up to the depot manager and I ask, or someone working the depot, and I say, where is Coke? They can very easily direct me to where the Coke section is. And if it's not the exact product I'm looking for, it will, you know, pretty much guaranteed be right next to it. Or else I can ask him the question again. With search, you don't have that luxury, right? So if I type in Coke maybe that's not the best example. Actually, I'll use a different example. If I type in milk, I'm searching for milk. What will happen, and what we found, this is a real example, what we found is it would regularly lead people to dairy milk. It wouldn't, and actually all the chocolate products, because they sold a lot better and a lot faster than milk did, often tended to be further up the search algorithm. And so in that environment, you don't have this luxury of being able to refine what the customer is looking for. You need to be able to present it in a way where they can find it themselves. And you know, what that kind of insight led us to realizing that you need to look for the right kind of search providers, ensure that they've got intelligence kind of algorithms that are at play that will help to, and that are constantly learning, by the way. That's the other important thing. Try not to tweak that search algorithm, which is what we did at the beginning. Not a good idea. The more you mess with it, the harder it is for the algorithm to learn naturally. You want that algorithm to learn effectively how customers are behaving and when they're not finding what they're looking for. So you have to almost build the logic in with the provider up front, and then let it kind of run its course and let it learn. And you know, for us, what that ended up meaning was that we ended up changing our search so that you know, when you search for milk, it would rather than it just basing it on what the most frequently purchased product is or what the most popular product is, it actually displayed 2 or 3 different categories. So it would show dairy milk first, and then it would show milk, and then it would show, there's one other one, I can't remember what the other one was now. There's another one that it would show as well. And then you could basically hover over that, the one that was most relevant, and then it would show you the products that were linked to that. So that's one kind of aspect of just making, again, the customer's journey as seamless and simple as possible. And then the other thing that's useful is we started to track zero result searches. So searches where people have typed in something and like nothing came up. You can start to identify gaps in your range, because there might be searching for products that you just don't stock, and so that's useful information for the trading team. And then the second thing is you can also start to understand different types of spelling errors, and basically attach them to the relevant product. So if people are regularly misspelling Heineken, let's say like the top zero result search or someone who's misspelling Heineken, then it's very easy to see in that top 20 which ones are linked to like which products, and then just building that into the logic so that next time someone makes a spelling error for something like that, the right product comes up. But really, actually, most intelligent search platforms now are able to pick up people's incorrect spellings anyway, and associate them with relevant products. So yeah, search really, really important to get search right. And for those two reasons: A, it's the most used element of the website in terms of ways of shopping, and B, it gives you some really useful data and insight in terms of how to improve your range, and what are the products that people are most searching for, etc., etc.
Fabulous. Well, clearly, I think the thing with optimizations, you said your job's never done. So, I mean, it is a massive topic, and there are loads of different tools, metrics, plans that you need to put in place and then keep building on. But I think in the time we've got available, we've probably done as good a job as we possibly can of covering the key things.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, again, it's no different to any other element of your business. You need to constantly be optimizing and adapting in any part of your business. The difference with digital is you can do it at pace, and you can test things and learn. So hence why, like I say, the hard work, it only starts once you've got your platform set up. That's when it becomes, in some ways really fun and really interesting. But also that's where you've got to start to really work at pace and work really hard.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. So that concludes this initial series, but I think, as Arnie said, we will be back.
Absolutely. This is not the end.
So we're going to take a couple of weeks off, I think, and then we've got some more exciting topics to cover in the Digital Leaders series, but potentially across different areas and different bits of focus. So I shall look forward to reconvening with you. But in the meantime, thank you so much for doing this particular series. It has been fantastic. No,
my pleasure. And I hope it's been useful and insightful. And I guess engaging, despite it being kind of over Zoom as well. So hopefully that's helped a lot of people and given people a bit more information about how to explore setting up the digital sides of their businesses at a time when they probably need it. So but no, really enjoyed it, and any questions that anyone has, I think is probably worth finding either Tanya or I on LinkedIn, I imagine, and dropping us a note. I'm always happy to answer any questions or anything people want more information on.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed, Salih Sheikh.
Thank you, take care.